Now, you may have seen the news this week that the UK government has stripped the citizenship of Shamima Begum, the British teenager who fled London to join Islamic State. It has echoes of the Australian government's treatment of Islamic State fighter Neil Prakash.
But is this the best way to address serious crimes? And what does it mean to be a citizen of a land? Dr. Sangeetha Pillai is a Senior Research Associate at the Kaldor Centre for International Refugee Law at the University of New South Wales. That's quite a mouthful, Sangeetha. You're from UNSW, let's just say that.
Yes.
What does it mean to be a citizen of a country?
Traditionally, what it means to be a citizen of a country is that there's like a compact between the citizen and the state, and the idea behind it is that the citizen owes allegiance to the state and the state protects the citizen. And so I guess the argument behind all these citizens, where the governments, the UK and Australian governments are coming from with these citizenship stripping laws, is that people like Neil Prakash and like Shamima Begum have broken their duty of allegiance to the state. So the UK and Australia are saying, we don't want you anymore. But traditionally, that's not how it's worked. People have been held to justice under the criminal law when they break duties of allegiance, sometimes being subject to very harsh penalties, but not excommunicated. So yeah.
So when that decision is made by a country, in the case of Shamima Begum, to strip them of their citizenship, that essentially means that they are stateless, but they still exist. They still have to go somewhere.
Yeah, and it's a bit confusing because at the moment, what you have in both of these cases, both the Prakash case and the Begum case, is the UK and Australia saying these people aren't stateless. The UK says Shamima Begum's a citizen of Bangladesh. Australian government says Neil Prakash is a citizen of Fiji, and that's the basis on which citizenship has been stripped. So the intention isn't to leave these people stateless in...
But sorry to interrupt, but just to clarify, these people do not have passports from those countries, right? Shamima does not have a Bangladeshi passport. She doesn't think that, apparently, that she's Bangladeshi. What the UK government is saying is because she has Bangladeshi parents, she should be entitled to Bangladeshi citizenship were she to apply for it. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to say you've done something that we're going to make... that you already have citizenship to our country, but you've done something so bad we're going to strip you of that citizenship and then expect Bangladesh to have such a lower standard that they're going to be willing to bestow citizenship upon somebody who's done something that you don't think that they're worthy of citizenship for.
Exactly. It's basically a huge mess. A government deciding that it thinks that a person has a foreign citizenship or is entitled to a foreign citizenship doesn't make that true, and it doesn't. Bangladesh is not likely to be very encouraged to grant admission to somebody that they've just been told is a dangerous person. And there's nothing that the UK can do that can make it their problem. So both Prakash and Begum are left in situations where effectively neither of the states that might have claim to them wants them. And Prakash was born in Australia, born in Melbourne. Begum was born in the UK. It seems like that's the state that should take responsibility for them, and that's how it's traditionally worked in citizenship law.
If there is any appeal to this decision, what sort of legal case would Shamima Begum have or her family have?
It's a little bit more complicated in her case because, as you said, Josh, UK law does allow a person to lose their citizenship when they have an entitlement to a foreign citizenship. They don't have to actually have the foreign citizenship, so that makes it a little bit more complicated. But I understand that she's seeking to challenge the citizenship stripping decision on the basis that she's not Bangladeshi. Neil Prakash would also have that option to challenge his citizenship stripping on the basis that he's not Fijian. And if he were to do that, and if he were to succeed, that would mean that he would still be an Australian citizen. The cancellation or the stripping of his Australian citizenship would cease to be valid.
Now, I mean, some will be watching this and saying, please, Crimea River, these are people who have intentionally taken up arms with the most noxious people in the world in order to explicitly fight almost everything that we stand for in these countries and in the Western developed world. And I guess the counterposition to that you that you could make is, well, if merely having parents who were born in a different country can be grounds for no longer being a citizen of this country, then I believe about half of everybody in Australia has either a parent or grandparent who's born abroad. So does that mean that the immigration minister can summarily decide that a crime is so grave that I am no longer an Australian? On what grounds does he say that? I'm as much of an Australian as he is.
Yeah, and I mean, it gets into complicated territory, and certainly what these laws do is it creates a two-tiered citizenship system where your citizenship is more secure if you have no claim to a foreign citizenship than if you do. So dual citizens are in a weaker position than sole citizens. It also, it's quite a mess, and I think to the point, I think it's a good point that you make that these are people that have made decisions that violate everything that democratic countries stand for, and that's not to be downplayed. But in the UK and in Australia, I think another way to look at it is to say that by saying we don't want a person who's a citizen of our country back ever again because they've done horrible things, states are abdicating the right to hold these people to account through our own very extensive criminal justice systems. In the UK and Australia, we have extensive surveillance powers, really, really broad working criminal laws that punish terrorism and conduct like this very harshly. And what you've got in the Begum case is someone left in a position where she wants to leave a terrorist cell, left there with nowhere else to go. And from an international security standpoint, arguably that strengthens the terrorist cause.
Is there much precedent for this? Are there experiences in the past that we can draw on and learn from for this particular case?
There have been experiences at various points in history of countries trying to revoke citizenship or excommunicate people when they're worried about security. I think the difference between then and now is that's usually occurred in a wartime, time-limited context, whereas now terrorism is an ongoing threat, so you don't see an end to this kind of behaviour. You've also seen it, the same situation that Prakash and Begum find themselves in play out in previous cases in the UK where a person's been stripped of their UK citizenship, and there was a case of a Vietnamese guy, Mr. Pham. The UK formed the view he was a citizen of Vietnam, and Vietnam said he wasn't, and he just sat in immigration detention for a really long time while that was mooted. So it hasn't worked. Like, there hasn't been an easy answer in any of the cases where it's been attempted.
And I can totally understand that if you come here from abroad and you're on a visa and you do something like get involved in terrorism, then you should be kicked out. Everyone would accept that you should be kicked out. But if you're already a citizen and you are already Australian, I think some people who think through this think, it's not actually about these particular people. It's about whatever the sort of fashionable thing that poses the greatest threat to us is at any point in time. And a half century ago, that would have been communism, and now it's terrorism. And in a half century's time, it'll probably be something else. And you never quite know whether or not the spotlight is going to turn on you if your citizenship, if your very Australianness is under threat. And that can obviously roll out in unexpected ways, not just towards terrorists. It's great to talk to you. Thanks so much for filling us in on the legal aspects of that.